I don't remember when I first noticed her. That sounds strange, considering she lives only a thin wall away. Maybe it was the morning I held the elevator for too long, pretending to scroll my phone, just so she could step in. Or maybe it was before that, when her laughter drifted through the open kitchen window on a late summer night, soft and unguarded, catching me in the middle of microwaving leftovers. She's married. That was the first fact I learned. The second was that she liked her coffee black, no sugar. I'd see her at the corner cafe sometimes, sliding her wedding band back into place after fishing coins out of her purse. Small things. Ordinary. But they stuck. Most mornings, I came here to the cafe because I liked the quiet before work. I'd sit at the far table, nursing a coffee I never finished, scrolling through news headlines without absorbing them. Today, though, I noticed her again before I noticed anything else. She sat near the window, a book open but unread, her finger tracing the spine of her mug. Her hair was still damp, like she'd showered quickly and rushed out. I told myself not to look too long. When the barista called my name, my voice sounded louder than I meant when I said, "Thanks." She glanced up at the sound. Just a flick of her eyes. Not even a smile. Still, it left me with that tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. I carried my cup over, sliding into my usual seat. I should have looked at my phone, but instead I caught her reflection in the glass, the faint curve of her mouth, as if she was listening to something only she could hear. After a few minutes, I heard her chair scrape against the floor. She walked past my table, pausing when her scarf slipped off her shoulder. I picked it up before she reached for it. "Thanks," she said. "No problem," I replied, handing it back. Our fingers didn't touch, but they almost did. She tilted her head slightly. "You live in the building next door, right?" I nodded, suddenly aware of how long I'd been waiting for her to notice. "Yeah. 4th floor." Her lips pressed together like she was deciding whether to say more. Then, almost reluctantly, she added, "I've seen you in the hall sometimes." I smiled, though it probably came out awkward. "Guess we've been neighbors without really being neighbors." That earned me the smallest laugh. Quick. Unsteady. She tucked the scarf back into place and said, "Well, it's nice to finally talk." And just like that, she was gone. Out the door, into the blur of cars and pedestrians. I sat there longer than I should have, staring at the spot she'd left behind. On my phone, I opened my messages. There was a draft still waiting, something I'd typed a few nights ago and never sent. "Hey, are you awake?" I stared at it, thumb hovering, but of course it wasn't for her. It wasn't for anyone anymore. I deleted it, locked my screen, and finished my coffee even though it had already gone cold. When I stepped outside, the wind bit harder than I expected. Across the street, I caught a glimpse of her heading into the market, scarf loose again, her steps unhurried. I wanted to follow, but I didn't. Instead, later that evening, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No name, just my apartment number scribbled in neat handwriting. Inside, a folded note. "Next time, say hello first. L." I read it twice, then 3 times, my hand stilling on the paper. The apartment felt quieter than usual, like it was waiting for me to answer. The note had been folded so neatly it felt deliberate, almost formal. Still, I couldn't stop myself from smiling when I saw the L. That night, I placed it on my desk beside my keys, as though it belonged there. The next time I saw her wasn't at the cafe, but in the hallway of our building. She was carrying 2 mini grocery bags, the kind that left red marks on her hands. I hesitated before stepping in. "Here, let me." She gave me a look like she wanted to argue, then sighed, letting me take half the weight. "You don't have to." "I know." In her apartment, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something floral. I set the bags down on her kitchen counter, trying not to look too much at the details. The mail stacked neatly, the framed photos turned slightly away from the light. You always help people, or just your neighbors? She asked, reaching for one of the bags. Mostly neighbors, I said, half joking. Her laugh was softer this time, less guarded. She poured tea into two mismatched mugs without asking if I wanted any, sliding one toward me. I took it, though the steam fogged my glasses. We sat across from each other at the small table. The silence wasn't awkward exactly, but it stretched. I found myself staring at the faint lines near her eyes, the way her hand lingered on the rim of her cup. She broke it first. I used to sit here with my husband in the mornings. He liked his tea too sweet. 2 spoons of sugar. I blinked, not sure if she realized what she'd admitted. Her gaze stayed on her mug. Used to? I asked carefully. She nodded once. Divorced. A while ago. Then, quickly, before I could reply. That's not an invitation to pity me. I shook my head. Didn't sound like one. The corner of her mouth lifted, but only faintly. She seemed to study me then, as though weighing whether to regret telling me anything at all. Something in me shifted. Maybe it was the quiet honesty of it, or the fact that she hadn't tried to make it sound neat. I wanted to say something back, something that mattered, but what came out was, I usually just drink instant coffee at home. It made her laugh, a real one, not the polite kind. She pressed her hand against her mouth, shaking her head. Well, at least you're honest. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. When I left her apartment, she walked me to the door. I said, Thanks for the tea. And she replied, Thanks for the help. But just before I stepped into the hallway, she reached out, brushing a bit of lint from my sleeve. Her fingers barely grazed my arm. A gesture so small, it should have meant nothing. It didn't. The next time we spoke wasn't planned. I was leaving the building late, jacket half sipped, when I heard her voice behind me. You're always coming or going. Do you ever stay still? I turned. She was holding her phone, keys dangling from the other hand, a faint smile playing at her lips. The kind of smile that asked nothing but lingered anyway. Not really, I said. Staying still feels harder. She tilted her head, like she understood. We ended up walking together, not far, just down to the corner market. She carried a list folded into quarters, and I pushed the basket along, tossing in items she pointed at without a word. It should have felt domestic. Ordinary. But there was something unspoken in the way our arms brushed, and the way she let me hold the basket even when it was nearly empty. At the register, the cashier glanced between us, then at her hand, at the absence of a ring. I felt heat crawl up my neck. She didn't notice, or pretended not to. Back at her apartment, I helped set the bags on the counter again. She reached for the same jar I did, our fingers colliding this time. Neither of us pulled back right away. You should go, she said softly. Not harsh. Just steady. I nodded but didn't move. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A man's name lit up the screen. She flipped it face down without answering. That silence, heavier than any words. I don't want you to get the wrong idea, she murmured, though her eyes stayed on the counter. And what's the wrong idea? I asked before I could stop myself. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She wrapped her arms loosely across her chest, like she needed to keep something in. The air between us felt sharp. I noticed her hands trembling slightly, how she pressed her thumb into her palm to stop it. Then came the interruption. A knock at the door, quick, careless. A neighbor, dropping off Ms. Delivered mail. He glanced at me, then at her, something unreadable flickering in his face before he left. She exhaled, finally moving past me to slide the envelope onto the counter. See? People notice things. Even when we don't mean for them to. I wanted to say, I don't care who notices. But the words stayed lodged in my throat. Instead, I reached for my jacket. I should go. She walked me to the door again. We stood there, too close, either of us moving. Her hand brushed the doorframe, mine brushed my pocket. For a second, her eyes lifted to mine, steady, searching, almost staring me. I leaned in before I realized what I was doing. Close enough to feel the warmth of her breath. She turned her head at the last moment, letting it pass as if it hadn't happened. Still, the pause lingered. Heavy. Unfinished. It was late afternoon, the kind of light that makes everything look softer than it really is. I found her outside on the bench by the side entrance, a book in her lap but unopened. She looked up as I approached, her mouth curving in something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're hard to miss these days," she said. "Guess I've been around," I answered, lowering myself onto the bench beside her. The wood creaked under our weight. We sat there in silence. The hum of traffic in the distance, a dog barking, someone's laughter carried down from a balcony. Ordinary sounds. But my chest tightened all the same. Finally, she closed the book, holding it against her knees. "It's strange," she said. "For so long, I felt invisible. Like I could walk into a room and no one would notice whether I stayed or left. And now," she stopped. Shook her head. "Never mind." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Now what?" Her eyes flicked to me, quick, almost defensive. "Now someone notices. And I don't know what to do with that." I didn't answer right away. I was too aware of how close we were sitting. Of the way her hand tightened slightly around the edge of the book, like it anchored her. "You think I don't notice you?" I said quietly. That made her laugh, not unkind, but sharp around the edges. "You're 24. I'm 46. Don't tell me you don't see how ridiculous that is." I swallowed. "Maybe it is. But that doesn't change the way I caught myself. The word almost slipped out. Her voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "The way you what?" Silence. The kind that stretches until it almost hurts. I stared at the ground, tracing patterns in the dirt with my shoe. My throat tightened. "I don't know," I muttered. "Sometimes it feels like you're the first person who's actually looking at me. Not through me. Not past me. Just me." Her breath caught, soft but audible. She turned her face away, staring at the parking lot. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she set the book down beside her, hands empty now. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said. But her voice wavered. "Why not?" "Because—" She stopped, pressing her palms together. "Because it makes me want to believe you mean it." The quiet stretched again, heavier this time. I watched her shoulders, the way they lifted slightly with each breath. Her hand shifted, fingers brushing the bench between us, almost touching mine. I thought of leaning closer. Of saying the word I'd stopped myself from saying. Instead, I asked, "Would you still want me to notice you tomorrow?" She looked at me then, eyes steady, unreadable. The question hung between us, unanswered. The next morning, she wasn't at the cafe. Or the bench. Or anywhere. I told myself it didn't matter, that we weren't meeting, not really. Still, I lingered longer than usual, pretending to scroll my phone while the barista wiped down empty tables. By the third day, I started to notice the absence. Her blinds stayed drawn. Her door, usually with a pair of shoes just outside, was bare. The hallway felt longer, quieter. Then, late that night, I heard her voice through the wall. Muffled but sharp. A phone call. Someone she didn't want me to hear. I caught fragments. "I told you, not anymore." And then silence. A heavy, deliberate silence. The next time I saw her, it was in passing. She was stepping out of the elevator as I was stepping in. She kept her eyes low, one hand clutching her bag to her chest. "Hey," I said. She gave a polite nod. Nothing more. I almost reached for the door to hold it open, but she'd already brushed past, her perfume fading too quickly. That evening I found out why. She wasn't alone when she came back. A girl walked beside her, maybe 19, maybe 20. Same dark eyes, same way of brushing hair behind her ear. Her daughter. I froze in the stairwell, pretending to check my phone while they passed. I couldn't tell if she'd seen me. But I saw the way her hand lingered on the girl's shoulder, protective, almost fierce. It should have explained everything. And yet it made everything messier. After that, her patterns changed. No more tea at the kitchen table. No more notes slipped under doors. When we crossed paths, she spoke like we were neighbors. Only neighbors. I tried to match her tone. To keep my voice even casual. But at night, lying awake, I replayed every silence, every pause. The way she'd almost let her fingers touch mine on the bench. The way she'd said it makes me want to believe you mean it. I typed a message more than once. Just her name. Then backspaced. Another time, did I do something wrong? Deleted. Then, I miss talking to you. Deleted again. The drafts piled up unsent. One evening I walked past her apartment. Lights on. Shadows moving behind the curtains. I stopped, hand hovering near the door. One knock. That's all it would take. But I didn't. I turned away, forcing my steps down the hallway, each one louder than it should have been. In bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It happened on a Thursday evening, not special in any way. I was unlocking my door when hers opened across the hall. She froze when she saw me, grocery bag in hand. "Hi," I said too quickly. She nodded. "Hi." It should have ended there. But one of the paper handles broke, a carton of milk rolling out onto the floor. I caught it before it split. "Guess you're always rescuing me from something," she muttered. Her voice wasn't cold this time. Just tired. I carried the bag inside for her. The kitchen was dim, only the under-cabinet light glowing. She set the rest of the groceries down and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. For a while, the only sounds were the rustle of bags, the fridge door opening and closing. I wanted to leave before the silence grew unbearable. Instead, I heard myself say, "You've been distant." Her head tilted slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to name it. "I thought that was what you wanted." "It's not." The words came out flat, but my throat tightened around them. She exhaled slowly, fingers tracing the edge of the counter. "You saw her." "My daughter." I nodded. "That's why," she said. "That's why this can't." She stopped herself, biting the inside of her cheek. "I can't afford to be reckless. Not at this point in my life." I leaned back against the opposite wall. "And you think I'm asking you to be?" Her eyes lifted then, sharp but unsure. "Aren't you?" I shook my head. "No. I rubbed my palms against my jeans, trying to find the words. "I just like being seen by you. That's all." Her expression shifted, softer now, though her mouth trembled. She pressed her hands flat against the counter, grounding herself. "You make it sound so simple," she whispered. "Maybe it is." We stood there, the air thick with everything unsaid. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, as if weighing something heavy. "You know what scares me?" she said finally. "That if I let this go even a little further, I'll want more than I can have. And I can't explain that to anyone else." The kitchen light hummed above us. I could hear my own heartbeat, uneven, too loud. I took a small step closer, not touching her, just enough to close the space between the counter and the wall. "Then don't explain it." Her lips parted, but no answer came. She just stared at me, like she was memorizing my face, the lines of it, the way I stood. For a moment, I thought she might lean forward. That maybe this was the point everything would break open. Instead, her hand reached out and brushed against mine on the counter. Barely there. A touch so slight I almost doubted it happened. Her voice was quiet, steady. Okay. That was all. Time didn't stop after that night. It never does. Days passed. Weeks. We still saw each other in the halls, at the cafe, sometimes on the bench by the side entrance. But it wasn't the same silence anymore. It carried weight, yes, but also a kind of comfort, like we had already named the unspoken thing between us, and now it lived quietly in the spaces we shared. Some mornings, I'd find her at the cafe before work. She still ordered black coffee, no sugar. I still pretended to finish mine. Once, she looked up from her cup, met my eyes, and just smiled. Small. Private. Like a secret only we were in on. Other times, it was the bench. Same old creaking wood. We sat side by side, not needing to fill every gap with words. Sometimes she'd bring a thermos of tea, one mug for her, one for me. I never admitted I didn't love the taste, but the warmth of it, the fact that she remembered, was enough. It wasn't dramatic. There were no declarations, no slammed doors or sudden kisses in the rain. Just small gestures stacking up until they felt solid. She'd straighten my collar without a word. I'd carry her groceries, even when she insisted she could manage. Her daughter was around sometimes. I stayed in the background, a neighbor, nothing more. But even then, I'd catch her glancing at me when no one else was looking, her gaze steady, unshaken. I realized that was what made this different. It wasn't about pretending we weren't afraid. It was about living with the fear and choosing anyway. One evening, I came home late. The hallway was quiet except for her door, slightly open, lights spilling out. She was on the bench outside, book in her lap, though she wasn't reading. "It's 8:47, she said when I sat down beside her. I frowned. "What?" She tilted her head, smiling faintly. "That's the time you always come back when you're pretending you don't notice me waiting here." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Guess I'm not as subtle as I thought." "Not even close." We sat there, listening to the hum of the city, the ordinary rhythm of life continuing around us. She leaned against me, not fully, just enough that her shoulder brushed mine. It wasn't permission. It wasn't confession. It was something quieter, more permanent. I didn't need to say anything. Neither did she. Because the truth was simple, we had stopped pretending. And somehow, that was enough.